Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I am Auron MacIntyre. Yes, Amerifest is going on. Yes, every conservative personality is slamming each other. They're all yelling at each other. They're all calling each other evil, and they're all agents of foreign governments. And everybody's got their theory about how the other one's destroying the party. And I probably could have got a lot more clicks talking about all that drama. But you know what? I'm tired, man. I'm tired. I have a country that is in dire straits. I am looking at a situation where if the Democrats win again, they are going to lock every Trump official in jail. They're going to send the FBI after all of the conservatives. It's going to be a disaster. They're going to open the borders. They're going to destroy everything. And the most important thing we can do is battle each other. We just had a compact article come out, kind of waking up all these centrist liberals to the anti-white discrimination that's going on in the United States, a sweeping program that has utterly destroyed generations of young white men in the United States. And instead of talking about that, making it like the only thing that we talk about, because it's like actually one of the most important things that affects the entire country, but specifically the voting base of the Republican Party, we're arguing over, Middle Eastern countries and all of these things. And look, of course, I've been in spats with other commentators at this point, but I'm just done. I'm done with that today. I would like to just enjoy ourselves. So, one of the things I've done at the end of the year, most years, my last show is something fun and Christmas themed. We've done like kind of Christmas spectaculars with different previous guests. We've had just hangouts and chats and ask me anythings, but it's usually a fun, casual way to just kind of get together and celebrate as we go into the holidays. And I figure rather than go over all the drama, let's hold on to our actual traditions on the show and just enjoy hanging out and talking to each other today. So I do want to do something a little different for my fun show this year. I have been writing about bourbon a little bit here and there. If you've been picking up Frontier magazine by the Blaze, you'll have read a few of my whiskey reviews at this point. It's something that I enjoy. It's collecting bourbons and talking about bourbons with friends. When they come over is a good pastime of mine. So I thought I'd share a little bit of that with you today, especially as you're heading the holidays. Maybe you need to grab that last minute Christmas gift, or you want to find a special bottle to share with the relatives when they're over. So I figured we could go into this. Now, I have broken this into two categories. The first is what we call kind of the normal stock shelf bourbon. These are five bourbons that you can find on the shelf at your average store for the most part, as long as you have a decent selection and distribution in your state. They're not going to break the bank. They might be a little more elevated. It's not the Jim Beam white label or the Jack Daniels old number 7. These are going to be a little more expensive, a little better, but they're not going to blow up your wallet. You're not going to have to hunt for them online or anything. They should be things you can reasonably walk in and show up. And, when you have something like that over on the holidays, people, you can kind of show them a nicer bourbon. You're not just pouring like the standard maker's mark or something for them, but you're also not throwing your wallet out the window. Then I also have my top 5 whiskeys of the year, and those are genuinely what we call allocated. For those who don't know, you have your standard bottles, and then depending on like how much people sell at any given store, there's like these harder to find limited edition bottles that start showing up. And those are often some of the best things that different distilleries put out every year, but they're also some of the hardest to find. Oftentimes they can be expensive. So I didn't just want to put all of those on here. It's like, well, here are the 5 best whiskeys you could try this year, and you're never going to be able to find them, and it'll be really hard, to get a hold of them. Like, that wouldn't be very fun. So I wanted to do kind of the affordable and easier to find section, and then I also wanted to do kind of the actual true best of the year. Now, I want to be clear on my criteria. These are all going to be American whiskeys. Not that there aren't other good whiskeys. In fact, part of this was inspired by my friend Morgoth, who did a review of Irish and Scotch whiskeys that he enjoyed this year. So there are others, but we are Americans here, so we're going to talk about American whiskey. It is also my preference. Bourbon is my favorite of the whiskey varieties, though I do enjoy a Scotch or an Irish whiskey from time to time. I'm not a big fan of Japanese whiskey. I know some people really love Japanese whiskey, but that's not my favorite. Now, that this means that we're going to be looking at bourbons, ryes, and possibly American single malts. Though I do not have any of the third category in this one. For my top bourbons of the year, it needed to be a bottle that I could get a hold of. So there have been other bottles that won't appear on this list that I've tried that I thought were very good. That might have even been in the top five of the year. But if I didn't get a hold of one, then I'm not putting it up there, because one of the things is that your palate changes. You know, you have different days, different bourbons hit you differently. So what could be amazing one day could not be as amazing the next day, and vice versa. If you don't have something that you can try multiple times over a certain period, then you're not going to get a real impression about how you feel about it. So, for instance, I had a William LaRue Weller this year, a friend had, and I also had a Jack Daniel's 14, both very difficult bottles to get a hold of. I did not have either of them. They were both excellent whiskeys, but they won't qualify for this. Same with like the Wild Turkey Beacon that came out this year. Another great tasting one, but just not exactly not exactly something I can put up there, because again, I can't look at that over and over. So let's start with the most basic stuff. All right. This is the stuff that's going to be on the shelf on a regular basis. Now, the first one, and if you've ever been into bourbon at all, you're probably familiar with this, but I wanted to include it just for the people out there who are putting their toe in there. This is the Wild Turkey Rare Breed. Now, if you've had a bourbon at all, you've probably run into Wild Turkey 101 at some point, always popular at parties, that kind of thing, something that gets mixed in. But Wild Turkey has a lot of elevated options, and one of them is the Rare Breed. Rare Breed is a very nice bottle because it's got a blend of 6, 8, and 12-year whiskeys in it, I believe. They're all different ages of bourbons. And the nice thing about that is you can get some of the older quality notes that you get out of that higher aged whiskey, but you don't have to pay as much. This bottle is often, I can even get this, I think, at the Walmart around here around 40 something dollars. That's usually $50 probably in other markets, but very affordable for the age that it is and the quality. It's at, I think, about, what is this, 116.8 proof. So it does have a decent proof to it. If you are somebody who is sensitive to that, then you can put it on a block of ice. In fact, if you're an ice block guy, I think this is one of the better whiskeys that develops nicely over a block of ice, but it has enough proof to stand up to the water in it. So if you end up enjoying your whiskey over a block of ice, I think this is an excellent candidate. And it's really just a quintessential bourbon. Like, it's got a lot of notes that are very much Wild Turkey. It's got kind of that very nice barrel char that often comes in with Wild Turkey. It's got the baking spices. It's got some of the cinnamon. It's got some of the vanilla, brown sugar. The mash bill is 75% corn, 13% wheat, and 12% malted barley. For those who don't know, the mash bill is the basic recipe that makes up the whiskey. It's the different ingredients, the grains, and depending on what you have mixed in, you're going to get a different dynamic. So that rye spice is usually going to give you kind of again, that spicy finish, that heat. The corn is going to give you the sweetness. That barley is often giving you kind of like a chocolatey or coffee tone. And so these things in different mixtures are going to impact the way that you can drink this one. But like I said, this is just a good entry level bottle for people unfamiliar with a higher quality bourbon. It's bold. It's got a lot of flavor. It's not overly complex, but it's something that, again, on a nice block of ice, something I think most people will be able to enjoy. The next one I have here is the Four Roses Single Barrel. Now, the Four Roses Single Barrels are new out this year. Four Roses has had a lot of different releases over the years. One of the problems is that while Four Roses has this really unique system of doing different mash bills mixed with different yeast, okay? If you aren't familiar, again, the mash bills are the different grains that go into the whiskey. And then the yeast is obviously how you do the fermentation process. And depending on the mixture of mash bills and yeast, you can get a very wide different types of flavors. So I think they have like maybe 16 different recipes with Four Roses, but you rarely got to experience them all, because most of what Four Roses does is blends those recipes together, and you can only get them in expensive and high proof and hard to find single barrels. That's the only time you can get kind of the specific recipes and specific expressions. Now they started doing these more affordable and easy to find on the shelf single barrels. This one is the OESO, which is my favorite of the four single barrels they put out this year. They're going to be doing four every year. So we're actually going to eventually get every recipe that Four Roses puts out. If you have a specific one that you're looking for, then you can hunt them down. They're nice because again, this one is 100 proof, so it's enough proof to have a nice flavor, to have a nice finish. It's not too thin. It's going to be nice on the palate. But it's 100 proof is not overpowering. It's not going to blow new people away. It's not, you're not going to have to use ice. You can drink it neat if you want to. You don't have to cool it off with a block of ice. So it's very versatile. It's got a lot of flavor. One of the nice things about Four Roses is the noses are particularly good. Four Roses always produces a very nice nose when you're smelling the bourbon. Oftentimes, if you want to smell the best parts of the bourbon, you have to kind of like put it in the glass, like the fancy Glencairn glass, and whirl it around and try to catch the different notes. The Four Roses are just always very fragrant. They're very powerful. And so it's just that's a nice quality that it retains even in this cheaper form. Now, this one is the recipe that has more of like the red fruits and the vanilla. It's very brown sugar. It's got a nice oak component to it. A little bit of clove in the back end, but not too much. It's not very high rye. But like I said, there's four different recipes, so you can kind of mix and match, figure out which one you prefer the most. That's just the one I like out of those the most. So the next one I want to talk about is from a distillery called Cedar Ridge. Now, you might think bourbon is from Kentucky. And of course, it's true that Kentucky and Tennessee contain the majority of the most famous whiskey distilleries in the United States when it comes to bourbon. But bourbon is not just stuck in Kentucky or in like the bourbon area, the bourbon belt in Tennessee. Some people want to get specific. Tennessee whiskey technically goes through a charcoal filtering process. So some people will say it's not bourbon, but it is bourbon. All Tennessee whiskey is bourbon, but not all bourbon is Tennessee whiskey. However, now there are far more states that are involved in making bourbon because it is just something that has to be made in the United States. It has to meet some other requirements. It has to be in a new charred oak barrel. Has to be a majority of corn in the mash bill, but you can make bourbon in any state. And this one is coming out of Ohio. So this is Cedar Ridge. They're probably going to be the hardest of the easy to find bottles just because they don't have a large distribution yet. You can still get them in, I think, most states at this point, but you might not just walk in and find their entire line on your shelf the way that you would with a Jack Daniels or a Wild Turkey. This is the first craft distillery that I'm talking about today. The Four Roses and the Wild Turkey, these are major distilleries with a lot of clout and lots of distribution. Their stuff is everywhere. You've probably seen at least their lower shelf products at bars and at parties and these kind of things. However, Cedar Ridge is doing it all on their own. And this is interesting because they have a grain to glass method, meaning that either they own the farm where the grains are grown or they are working with local farmers to determine the grains that are grown. And oftentimes this means that we're getting different types of corn, different types of wheat, specific varieties, heritage grains, heirloom grains. So you can get very different flavors out of the craft stuff. Now, this is their rye, double barrel rye. So there's a couple things going on here. First, it is a rye, not a bourbon, which means instead of the corn being the dominant note, the dominant grain, a rye grain is the dominant grain. Rye used to be more popular in the North. That's where most of the whiskey started, but then bourbon exploded in the South due to corn. And because that's the sweeter and more approachable of these two spirits, that's the one that tends to have grabbed people's attention. However, this is a pretty high rye one. I believe this one, what's the mash bill here on my notes? 85% rye, 12% corn, and only 3% barley. So this is a high rye. I have seen as high as 95.5 ryes. This one is 85. So it's not as rye driven as some northern ryes, but it is still pretty heavily on the rye. There are more what we call a Kentucky rye or a Tennessee rye, a southern rye, and that one tends to be more corn. It's just barely legally rye. Usually it's like 55% rye, and the rest is corn. So it tends to have a sweeter and more agreeable palate to bourbon drinkers. This one would be the other direction. However, this one went through an interesting process. This is the double barreling process. So what they do is they put it in the first new charred oak barrel. It ages there. And then when it's done, they move it into a second new charred oak barrel. Now, sometimes this finishing process is done with different barrels. It's done with wine barrels, so it imparts those different notes, or a tequila or a rum barrel, so it kind of adds some of those flavors. Sometimes they will put it in a second toasted barrel that is not, it's still new, but it doesn't have any char in it, and that tends to produce more of like a syrupy pancake type marshmallow flavor. This one is interesting because it's two new charred oak barrels in a row, and it's on a rye. Now that's good because oftentimes the double barreling will become oversweet. It's ironic because, of course, you get the darker oaks. You're getting double the oak in there, but you're also getting a really really syrupy sweetness, and it kind of balances out the bitterness of the oak. In this instance, instead, what's happening is that the herbalness that often comes with the rye and the heavy rye spice is a little subdued by the double barreling, which produces an interesting flavor because it's not as chocolatey and syrupy and coffee like and marshmallow like as you get from a bourbon that's double barreled, but it's not as bright and floral and herby as you get in a standard rye. It produces a really nice balance, I think. I'm somebody who does enjoy a more powerful rye. However, this strikes a nice balance between the two. It's at I think 107 proof, 105 proof. So nice proof again, elevated enough to get you flavor and finish, but not so much that you'd have to drink this on a block of ice, or be put a lot of hair on your chest in order to give it a shot. Let's see here. Our next one is still Austin. So, in our theme of craft and not made in standard bourbon states, this is a Texas bourbon out of, you guessed it, Austin, Texas. And they are very interesting. So, the way that Texas whiskey works, again, if you're not familiar with how whiskey gets aged, it's the expansion in and out of the barrel staves that actually gives whiskey its flavor. When you put the white dog, when you put the stuff just off the still in, it has some sweetness, it has some flavor, but most of what you're looking for is the aging and maturity that comes out of moving in and out of the barrels. And one of the reasons that places like Kentucky and Tennessee were so well liked for this is because they really sat at a nexus where things get hot in the summer but cold in the winter, which means the whiskey expands into the barrel staves when it's hot, and then it contracts out of the barrel staves when it gets cold. And this in and out produces the flavor. Now in Texas, obviously it's extremely hot. So the funny thing about this is normally a bourbon's going to be aged at least 4 years, and that's still kind of young, hopefully like 6-7 years. This is only 2 years old out of still Austin, but because the Texas is so hot, it swells deeply into the barrel and produces a lot of deep, rich notes in there. It ages very quickly. It gets a lot of oak. It gets a lot of sugar. It builds quite quickly in that process. So I'm a fan of the stuff they do. I've got one friend, every time he comes over here, he immediately wants to grab something from Still Austin because he's a huge fan of what they put out. And this one is 70% corn, 25% rye, and 5% barley. So this is a higher rye than some of the other bourbons we've talked about so far. So it's got a good spice to it. It's got that deep brown sugar and oak. Even though it's only been around for 2 years in that oak, it's still got it. It's got this kind of sticky molasses quality to it, and then a nice vanilla as well. All right, and then my last one of the affordable category is this Old Fitz number 7. Now, this has technically been a little hard to find recently, but it's now finally getting into wider distribution. It was always meant to be an on-the-shelf staple from Heaven Hill in their distillery. However, it was so popular that it was hard to find for a little bit. So this is their 7-year bottled and bond, and this is what we call a wheated whiskey. So what they do is, instead of having the rye as the flavoring grain, they replace it with wheat. Now remember, rye is what gives you the spice. It's what gives you the kick in a bourbon. Well, the wheat is going to soften that. It's going to give a different dynamic. It's got what some people would call the wheat funk to it. It tends to be smoother. It often produces like a cherry note, though not in this one. This one is more like a golden honey, caramel, butterscotch. It's a very easy sipper. It's not super complex, but it's a really nice bourbon to start people out with. It's a bottle and bond, so it's got a 100 proof. It's 7 years old, so it's got a nice age to it. As you can see, the decanter bottle is quite nice, so it's a good gift or something to just kind of have up on the shelf. It looks nice. It's aesthetically pleasing, along with being delicious. And again, just a very easy sipper, something that you can pass over to somebody who's just starting in bourbon. The proof isn't going to blow them away. The wheat is going to soften the finish, so they're not going to have that big burn afterwards. Something that even a novice could drink neat if they wanted to, and certainly with a piece of ice is going to be very easy and approachable. All right, so those are all our easier to find whiskeys. Let's take a look at the top 5 whiskeys of the year. Now, those weren't in any order. This is. So this is my number 5 for the year. And this is the Maker's Mark Cellar Aged. So Maker's Mark is itself a wheated whiskey. And they are a grain to glass. They work with their old, with their own farm and their own grains. They use a soft red winter wheat for this one. And this is a whiskey that is got this age here on the side here. It's a 14, 13, and 11-year-old blend. So they're blending those 3 different ages of whiskey together. And the key from Maker's Mark is they don't like to have a lot of oak on kind of their base product. They'll add oak staves and these kind of things, but they tend to not have a ton of oak on the base product. So one of the things they did, because as you age whiskey, it gets oakier. It takes on some of those bitter tannins that come from the oak barrel. Some people like that. Some people are very put off with that. We'll talk about that more in a second. So to avoid that, Maker's Mark ages this older product in a cellar. So it's down in kind of like a cool cellar cave that they have rather than up in the rick house where things get hot and we get a lot of expansion. That means that even though the whiskey has been aging, it has not been pulling as many of those like bitter oak elements in there. So it's a very nice pour. I tend to like a Maker's Mark when they do the normal Maker's Mark is fine, but it's not like my go-to in any way, shape, or form. But when they do these special releases, they put a little more care into their stuff. It usually turns out rather well, and I'm a fan of this one. It's got nice cinnamon notes. It's definitely got a good amount of baking spice and caramel, brown sugar. Again, many of those classic notes, but it is wheated. So I think the proof is like 112. So decent proof, but nothing overpowering. And something that, again, because it's wheated, is not going to just go crazy on your palate if you're someone who is sensitive to that kind of thing. All right. So this next one is the Knob Creek 21 year. You can see it comes in a fancy box. Now, this is a bourbon that's old enough to drink itself. So to say that this thing is oaky would be an understatement. It's very large. I'm going to push off the side here. So to say this is oaky would be quite the understatement. This is very old. And it's interesting because my friend had the Knob Creek 18-year-old, and I tried that one, and it was too oaky. Like, it was overwhelmingly oaky. And it was almost like drinking a lumberyard at Home Depot. It was just unpleasant. Now, I like a lot of oak on my bourbon. I like the ultra-aged notes. But that one was just too much. Surprisingly, you would think 3 more years in an oak barrel, it would get oakier, but actually what happened is that it mellowed out and became more pleasant. It's still very oaky, don't get me wrong. This is a climb. This is not for new bourbon drinkers. It's not for someone who's casually walking in. If you do not like ultra oaked bourbon, this is not for you. However, now that oak is more mature and subdued, and you start to get a vanilla, you start to get leather and tobacco, which are some of my favorite like ultra aged bourbon notes. You really only get them once you start to get up there in age. And oak, it's got a nice cherry note that sits on top of it. It's not overwhelming. It's not bright. It's more of like a pushing through. It kind of sits at the back, but it is very nice. So overall, very much a nice bottle. Though again, don't just run out and grab that one if you are not a fan of oak, because you will find yourself very angry at it. All right, so the next one is from Buffalo Trace. So if you are familiar with bourbon, you'll probably know that Buffalo Trace is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, distillery in the United States. The only problem is that so much of their stuff is incredibly hard to find, even when it's not allocated. It's very, very much popular across the country. People love things like Blanton's and the Basic E.H. Taylor and Eagle Rare. These are always bottles that people are looking for, often are treated allocated when they're not. They're just so in demand that people will chase them. This one is the E.H. Taylor barrel proof. So every year they come out with a batch of barrel proof version. Now I like the standard E.H. Taylor. That's my favorite Buffalo Trace product. But this one is the higher proof version. This one is a bit of a monster. It's 127.4 proof. So it's definitely something you're going to want a little bit of ice with, especially if you're not used to drinking the higher proofs. Now, the proof creates a lot of flavor. It's a lot of flavor concentration, but it can be overproofed and too hot. The nice thing with this one is it drinks a little under its proof, and then of course you can also add ice to calm it down. You don't have to just have that proof at that straight high level. However, interesting thing this year, Buffalo Trace actually released two batches, or which with two distinct flavor profiles inside the H. Taylor. So this is the one that's slightly higher. This is the 0.4 instead of the 0.2. But I really like this one because it actually has one of the most interesting and bright cherry notes I've ever had in a bourbon. It's very distinct. It's hard to explain other than it's like you took a Luxardo cherry and turned it up to 11. It's also got a very nice oak to it, a nice vanilla, a nice caramely butterscotch. Many of the notes you would associate with the H. Taylor, but again, just with that ramped up oak and cherry note on top of it. So very pleasant. Enjoy it quite a bit. Cherry is one of my favorite notes in bourbon. So when I find one that is that dynamic and that good, I certainly enjoy it. All right. So the second best bourbon I had this year was the Jack Daniel's 12. For those who don't know, Jack Daniel's does a lot more than just its normal old number 7 anymore. Many of the new releases from Jack Daniel's are quite good. They're barrel proofs. Jack Daniel's makes a phenomenal rye now. Actually, funny enough, like they make one of the best ryes in the game, and you can get them for like $60. It's really, really good value. They've been putting out their new toasted product is really good. Just Jack has been killing it, not only because they put out a wide variety of very good products recently that have really elevated what they used to do, but they also have kept their prices very affordable. A lot of their stuff is very easy and in reach if you can find it. So this is their age stated line. They have a 10, a 12, and a 14 year. Now I wasn't able to find a 14 year this year. I did get to taste it. A buddy of mine had it. It was really good. I would say, however, I did enjoy this 12 more this year. Now that's not always the case. This is the first year they had the 14, and the previous 12s have been good, but this one is particularly good. This is the third batch of the 12 year they've put out, and I think this one really stands out heads and shoulders above the rest. This Buffalo Trace really has a very interesting, this Jack Daniel's has a very interesting off-profile taste to it, along with all the classic Jack notes you'd expect at a decent proof. I think of like 107. It also has like a raisin and red wine note that's very dominant, or red fruit as well. So there's just like this mixture of fruit in here. You got like the red fruit, like a wine finish, a kind of a separate grapey or raisin finish. Like it's all included in this 12 year. It's just a very, very interesting and complex whiskey that I was very surprised. I've always liked the elevated Jack Daniel's stuff, but I have to say they really outdid themselves this year with the Jack 12 year. And then finally, this was my favorite whiskey of the year. This is the Four Roses limited edition blend. I believe they blended a 19-year-old version of their high rye recipe with a 13-year-old version of their high rye recipe, and then another 13-year-old recipe to come out with this one. And I really just enjoy this one a lot. Again, not big into Four Roses' more basic offerings, though glad the single barrels came out this year. But their limited editions are just top notch every year. They really crank out some of the best limited edition whiskey if you can get your hands on it. It's a lot of red fruit. It's a lot of vanilla, brown sugar. And because of that high rye content, you also get the rice spice and the mint and the clove that's often present in a rye, but none of it's overwhelming. It's all a very gentle part of this. And of course, on top of that, being having 19-year-old whiskey on it, you're also getting the oak. But the fact that it's mixed in with that 13, 14-year-old means that you get the oak. It's there, but it's not like the Knob Creek 21 where it's just overpowering. It's just hitting you in the face with the oak at the end of the day. Yep, we got there. So this is my favorite of the year. But let me know what you guys think. If you're bourbon fans or rye fans, tell me what you enjoy. We've got some time left here, and that's really just what I wanted to do, is turn this into one of the, kind of the end of year ask me anything. Uh, I'll start with super chats first, but I'll also take other questions. Just make sure to at me um, in the comments there. If you're somebody who has a question, just go ahead and give me an at so I can find your question for the chat. But we'll get started over here with our super chat. Joe McDermott says, Merry Christmas, friends. God bless us all in the battle of 2026 with a generous donation. Well, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that quite a bit. Always great talking to you guys. The show just continues to grow. It always feels strange because it's just amazing that I get to do this. Just a dream come true that is able to get into this position and do this for a living. And so I'm always incredibly grateful. I know so many of you have been around since the earliest days of the channel. Many of you have supported me in different ways, and I just really appreciate that you guys have been so encouraging and along for the ride. So it really is fantastic to see. It looks like we're building up some other questions here. Mr. Biofan says, Hey, Auron, what's the best board game and what's the best board game you played this year? Ooh, good questions. Good questions. I haven't played a ton of new board games this year. I just have so many board games at this point that I've been avoiding playing a bunch of new ones. My friend just got what board game did he get? He got a card game, Riftbound. That one's not a board game, but he brought that over with sample decks, and that was an interesting customizable card game. I had not played that one yet. One of my favorite board games of all time is Battlestar Galactica, the board game. I'm sorry, you can't pick it up anymore. It's been out of print for a long time, and it's very expensive to find on the secondary market at this point with board games. But it's kind of the world's best version of Werewolf or Mafia, if you've ever played those. It's a very cool game. You gotta, if you're familiar with Battlestar Galactica, you have to hunt down who's the robots, who are the Cylons, that kind of thing. Really always enjoyed those games quite a bit because you're not just playing the board, you're also playing the players. So that's the most interesting part. What can you read on people's faces? That kind of thing. Biofan also says, Hey, Auron, what's the best board? Oh, it's the same one there. Okay, just asked it twice. FBI informant says, Angel's Envy is my favorite distillery, but it's a little pricey. So the difficulty with Angel's Envy is they finish everything, right? Like they have, I think, one or two of just like their straight bourbons, but almost all of it is finished in rum casks and wine casks and tequila casks and all these things. And it tends to be a little hit and miss. So some of them will be really good. My friend bought a tequila cask this year that we tried. That was very tasty, but it was way overpriced. And then I've had the rum cask one, and that one's good, and that one's more efficiently priced. So it really is. You're right that they can have some good ones, but I've been impressed with their stuff, but I've never been impressed with it in its price ratio, which is a little tough because there's just so many other people doing good finishes these days. I'd rather have a Cedar Ridge finish, honestly, than I would Angel's Envy most of the time, even though Angel's Envy can put out some good stuff for sure. Gable Fisk says, have you ever tried all corn bourbon? I got one in Kentucky and it was amazing. So yeah, the other name for this is called light whiskey. It's single grain whiskey, right? And the trick with light whiskey is it usually needs to be aged a long time because it doesn't have any of the flavoring grains. So you have to impart the flavor entirely through the barrel. The mash bill is just going to be sweet corn. And don't get me wrong, that has its own allure, but it's not, it's kind of just straight corn syrup at some point if it's not given other dynamic qualities. So if you've ever had some of the light whiskeys that have been aged for 14 years, yeah, they are really interesting. Like young straight corn whiskey, no, not for me, because that's just going to be too sweet. It's not going to have any dynamics to it. It's not going to have any depth to it. It's just going to be the sweetness. So it's one of those scenarios where it's something you can have and can be very good, but it just has to be done in a very particular way for me. Let's see here. Kamkata says, thoughts on M.E. Mummery. Me Mummery? Sorry, I don't know what that is. You're going to have to give me some more details on that. Joe McDermott says, do you have a New Year's resolution? I tend to not be someone who like makes explicit New Year's resolutions, but of course I have goals. And I think there's a natural tendency to see the renewal of the year as a time to move into something different or start over or begin big projects. It's a monumental reminder that life is short and we only have so much time to do the things that we want to do. I have an incredible blessing in that I have now achieved a lot of the things that I ever thought I was going to do. But of course, there's always more. You can always be better. You can always be more effective. You can always improve at what you're doing. And so I'm trying to do all that. I also have a couple different book ideas half written at this point. So if I was going to have one New Year's resolution, it's probably to make enough time to write my next book. It's just hard to do that when you're grinding the shows and the appearances and you're traveling and everything else and family and whatnot. It's hard to sit down. When I wrote my first book, I basically wrote it over several years of the YouTube channel, accumulating these different essays that I was doing for the channel and writing elsewhere. I was kind of all they were different in tone. They had different subjects, but they were all kind of centering around this idea of the managerial state and scale and the problems that were presented by elite theory. And so when I kind of sewed those things back together for a book, it was relatively easy. I just took what I'd already written and more or less turned it into a book. Yeah, I had to do a lot of providing connective tissue and making the essays make sense together. I had to rewrite large chunks of it, but the research was done. The citations were done. The ideas had been formed, and so I was really more revising than writing. This time, I've got to write it from the ground up, so it's a little more of a, involved process. Let's see. The Tasteful Chicken says, "Are you going to do some more commentary roundtables with the Blaze next year?" It's a great question. Of course, last year we had the election, so I was on, the election desks, and we were doing roundtables there. We haven't always done a personality roundtable. It tends to be who's where. The Blaze is based in Texas, but not all the hosts live there, including me, and so we're not always there at the same time. I'm on the shows of guys like Steve Dace and Jason Whitlock on a fairly regular basis. I've been on Sarah Gonzalez and Ali Beth Stuckey and Stu and all these guys. So we know each other and we've talked to each other and but we rarely get everyone together to kind of do one. That might be something in the future. I'm sure it's something that people would want to see, but I can't tell you right away that we have one of those on the schedule. Bobby says, "What is your favorite Christmas movie, and which Christmas movies do you hate?" Well, you could always do the like cheesy, Die Hard is a Christmas movie thing, and I love Die Hard. It is one of my all-time favorite movies, but I'm not going to cop out by going with that as my Christmas movie. I always have the Charlie Brown Christmas special was just the core Christmas thing we watched in my house. That was critical. It wasn't really Christmas until Linus had explained to you what Christmas was all about. But I've always also loved White Christmas as one of my favorites. I've always enjoyed It's a Wonderful Life, though I tend to watch that one every other year, kind of rotate that one in. Those are some of my top ones. A Christmas Story. I know that one gets hate as like boomer, nostalgia or whatever, but I love that movie. I don't care what you say. That movie's hilarious and closely associated with Christmas for me, so I enjoy that quite a bit. Let's see. What Christmas movies do I hate? I don't know. There's plenty of them. All of the new, completely secular trash. I mean, don't get me wrong. Something like White Christmas isn't exactly Jesus centric, but at least it seemed to embrace the spirit of the season in a more wholesome sense. Now you've got like The Rock riding around with CGI reindeer firing off missiles. I don't know. It just seems kind of dumb. Pilot G216 says, I know you're a Sabotage guy. Do you have a favorite Christmas song other than their offshoot, Trans-Siberian Orchestra? Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm a huge Sabotage fan. And, the funniest thing is that whenever someone doesn't know who Sabotage is, I'm like, yes, you do. You've listened to them every Christmas. It's called the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. But if we're excluding them, if we just want to stay in the metal realm of Christmas albums, I think that Rob from Judas Priest, Rob Halford, has a couple of very fun Christmas albums. I was just posting the August Burns Red metal Christmas album. I know that Skillet was very controversial this year for putting out "O Come, O Come, Emmanuel" with a metal breakdown near the end. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, I enjoy all of those. Right wing referee says, "You say you're from Florida. Are you FSU or a UF man?" I am. I went to USF. I went to the school in Tampa. So I am a USF man. Though I must say I do not watch a lot of college football. I do mostly watch just the Buccaneers. Not because I don't enjoy college football, but honestly, I usually just watch one team, and it's hard to catch all the USF games. They just aren't on all the time. Sometimes they've been good. Sometimes they'll make the top 20. Sometimes they won't. But yeah, if I'm picking a Florida team, that's mine. Let's see here. Anaram says, "Merry Christmas, Auron. Any distillery you can recommend visiting as a tourist?" Well, thank you. Merry Christmas to you. So I haven't been to that many distilleries. I've been to the Jack Daniels one, which I could definitely recommend. That was a great, that's a huge campus, a very interesting distillery tour. I went on the Uncle Nearest tour just because it's next to that one, but that one's all super social justicey because a black woman founded it. They're actually going into bankruptcy. I think it's their question whether that brand will even continue because they apparently leveraged all of their debt against uh, uh, whiskey barrels. In Tennessee, there's a law where you can actually take out loans against the future profits of your whiskey barrels. And they did that and it did not work out for them. So I don't even know if they're going to still be there. That's really all the distilleries I've been to. I might end up going to more. Probably sure I will. But so far, that's all we got. We don't really have a lot of distilleries in Florida. So if I want to go to one, you kind of have to travel to Tennessee or Kentucky or places like that. KO7772 says, "Thanks for all the streams with the great guests that we really enjoy. Is all the chaos post Charlie assassination people striving for power, position, or is it something else?" I just did a thread on this. And of course, like I said, I really want to avoid all the influencer drama, but that was kind of the point of the thread was, why are we in this scenario? And when I think about it, kind of one of the things I said in the thread was ultimately one of the reasons we're in this scenario is the new right had to go in this guerrilla warfare mode, right? So one of the things that uh, institutions do is they make you slow and they make you unresponsive. So the right didn't have any institutions really, and the left had lots of them. And so our tactic was basically to subvert the need for robust institutions by basically going to this guerrilla warfare that new media allowed. And that was really good because it created the advantage that, the rebels always have against the empire. You can do the guerrilla tactics. You can do the strikes. You're not centralized. It's easy for you to move and hit and adapt. And I think when we look at the media environment, it's very clear that the right, especially through the podcast sphere, has dominated that recently in a way that we probably haven't seen since talk radio was insurgent. And this one is even more decentralized and even more able to steal power away from legacy media. The downside with that is, of course, the T.E. Lawrence problem. What happens when T.E. Lawrence is no longer there or is no longer able to bind the Arab coalition together against the Ottomans? They fall apart. They can't get the job done. This is the classic problem with kind of having this tribal structure. It's great in the sense that you can, strike from anywhere and be nimble and agile, but you don't really have much holding you together. And it turns out that actually Charlie Kirk might have been our T.E. Lawrence. He might have been the guy who was really, binding these different tribes together. And so afterwards, what does that look like? Well, it's all the people who hated each other, who had been, competing with jobs with each other, competing for audience with each other, had been disagreeing on issues, disagreeing on motives, slapping each other. Suddenly all that stuff comes to the forefront. There's no one to cool things down. There's no Charlie to make the phone call and be like, "Don't say that, delete that tweet. We'll work it out. I'm going to put you guys together on the phone. We're going to have a Zoom meeting." There's just no longer that guy anymore. "Hey, I'm going to invite both of you to Turning Point and we're going to hash this out." I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure Turning Point is going to continue to do that, but Charlie was a Rolodex, right? He was and a diplomat. It wasn't just the institution. So you can try to use the institution, but we really don't have a lot of them to discipline the message. And so that means I think that people are scrambling for all kinds of things. I think some of it is power. I think some of it is position. I think some of it is just petty hatred. And, we got to get rid of that. But I'm not sure how to solve this problem because there are real pernicious threats on the right. There is the attempt to return us back to Con Inc., Mitt Romney, John McCain neocon politics. Like you can see it everywhere. It's being pushed by major media outlets. It's being pushed by think tanks. It's being pushed by individual actors in in different offices and media. And so that full frontal attack is happening. And so I'm not sure what to do because in some sense we have to stop those bad actors from trying to kind of be resurgent and return the Republican Party to a pre-Trump state. Simultaneously, we can't spend all of our time sniping at each other. Like every episode can't be like, what did Tucker say about Candace? What did Candace say about Charlie? What did like you can't do this forever. Oh, Megyn Kelly sent out a tweet. Oh, I can't believe that Josh Hammer said that. Like we can't do this forever. So there has to be some kind of resolution, but without a binding figure like Charlie and the fact that the Trump administration has kind of got stuck in the mud, we used to basically be a coalition built on winning for once. Like Trump held the coalition and dictated the terms because he won. And then Charlie was the kind of guy that went through and smoothed things over as a diplomat. Well, Trump's not winning and Charlie's not here to be the diplomat. And so we're up a creek a little bit on this one. And I don't have a great answer. I don't want to sit around being bitter and ugly to other commentators all day. Like I'm sick of it, man. I'm sick of it. Like to the extent I've been involved in it, I don't want to be involved in it anymore. But I also don't know how to keep quiet when like there are obviously these malicious actors who are trying to get people fired or ruin their lives or get the bounce to their coalition because they're not, the most excited person sending $5 billion over to someone's favorite country. Like I don't know how to fix this. I genuinely don't. We have to be able to have these disagreements. We have to be able to fix these problems. We have to be able to push out bad actors, but we also can't spend every day talking about, all the different drama going on. Like we just had in the last few days, one of the biggest stories that broke through, and it didn't just break through conservative media, it broke through into liberal media. Even the centrist liberals were talking about the terrible things that have been done to white men. That should have been like all of the conference. Like all of TPUSA should just been people saying, we have to stop this. We have to end this attack on, our core voters, our core demographic that support the Republican Party. We need to fight back against these injustices. We need to file lawsuits. We need to see firings. We need to see public shamings. There needs to be public reckoning, I believe is the term the left use on these issues, right? And we're just not seeing any of that. Everyone is obsessed with saying, but have you decried, whichever podcast host I hate the most? Are you currently attacking the foreign influence that I hate and supporting the foreign influence I love? And to be clear, increasingly, it's obvious that there is foreign influence on both sides of this whole thing. And so I just don't know. I don't have a great, sorry, I spent a lot of time on that question, but it is something I've been thinking about. I don't want to turn the stream into it, but that is something that I've definitely think about. Joe Williams says, what books should I read before I start my political podcast next year? Excellent question. Excellent question. It depends on what you've read so far. However, I'll just go with some of the basics. Of course, you should be reading The Laws, The Republic, and the different dialogues from Plato. You should be reading Rhetoric, Politics, and Ethics from Aristotle. You should be reading Machiavelli, The Prince, and you should read Discourses on Livy if you're familiar enough with Roman history to get something out of it. There is a lot of references in that book, so if you're not familiar, that can be difficult. You should read The Machiavellians by James Burnham. You should read The Total State. I hear that one's decent. You should read On Power from Bertrand de Juvenal. You should read The Generative Nature of Political Constitutions and Sovereignty. Both of those are essays from Joseph de Maistre. I would say that's. Oh, and I would definitely say Patrick Deneen's Why Liberalism Failed. That's just a smattering. I didn't, I would probably have a more careful and thoughtful layout for like an actual program or something. But those are just the first ones that pop into my head that I think you really need to get a good mix of classical political, grounding, while then also obviously there are many authors in between that you need to read as well. But that gives you a mix of kind of ancient, kind of Enlightenment and new all simultaneously. So Bobby says, I've noticed movies started to suck since 2010, and then the article came out about not hiring white men in the media starting in 2011, and I got my answer. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this, Jeremy and Carl and I did when he was on a few days ago to discuss this. But credit to Matt Walsh also for just coming out and saying very directly, like, obviously the thing we're not supposed to say, but the conclusion that's impossible to avoid from this story coming out is not only were white people systematically removed from all of these prestigious positions, not only were specifically white men barred from access, but all of these institutions got worse. And that's because, by and large, white men have been responsible for more of the dynamic, creative output, scientific output, and pretty much every other cultural achievement in the United States. Now, of course, many other people of other backgrounds, races, ethnicities have contributed. But that core has been critical to the success of the United States. And when you remove it, you can't be shocked when you're also removing a good amount of your most talented people. Joe says, is Christmas in Florida fake because of the weather? No snow. I mean, I've had most of my Christmases in Florida. So for me, Christmas is a time in which the temperature gets down to 50 degrees. I was in Washington, D.C. Last week, and it was 20 degrees outside, and I almost died. So so I am not built for the cold. I am not built for snow. It's pretty and everything, but it's cold, it's wet, and I just don't ever want to do it. Let's see here. Looking for some more. Make sure you include my if you're talking to me, guys, because there's just so much chat. It's hard to pick out questions that don't have the in there. Joe Williams says, can we request quests for the new year? Things to achieve. Okay, sure. We'll go with some of the easy things first. Obviously, if you are not in a church and in a relationship with God, you need to fix that. It's okay if you have difficulty with faith, if it's something you have to work towards, but you're going to work on it this year. It's okay if you walk in and you're not immediately a believer. It's okay if you don't immediately even buy everything, but you're going to go to church and you're going to talk to people and you're going to pray, even if you don't mean it, even if you're just trying to figure it out. You're going to read the Bible. You're going to talk to God. You're going to build relationships in your community. And worst case scenario, you're going to meet a lot of really good people. You're going to get some wise teaching that will help you, even if you're not Christian. You will probably build a support group of people who will help you in difficult times. And God willing, you're going to come to Christ. Also, if you are not putting in time at the gym, that's something you need to be doing. If you're not putting in time training in some kind of combative, whether it's a martial art or gun training, these are things that you should be doing in the new year. It's things you should have been doing anyway, but it's a good thing to start. And I'll put one that maybe is a little less obvious, but one you should absolutely doing. You need to be organizing. It's time not just to go to church, but it's time to join your local Old Glory Club chapter or another fraternal organization that's aligned. I know there's a few of them that have popped up that aren't exactly the OGC, but are a similar mindset. Or you need to be joining local groups. You need to be participating in community. You need to be building a Rolodex of like-minded people that you can rely on. If something went sideways, if there was a problem, if there was something you need to get fixed, if your community needs something, you need to be able to call these people and make it happen. I'm down here and there are a lot of hurricanes, and my church is the one that the community calls when the hurricane comes. We're the ones that make sure that people have food and water. We're the ones out there with chainsaws. We're the ones out there doing demo and clearing out sites and repainting things and all that, after the storm. And not only is that a positive impact on the community, but it also means you have a lot of power. Just to be practical, you shouldn't just do it for the power, but the practical result is if you're a citizen that your community can rely on, then you're going to wield more power in that area. You're going to wield more influence. You're going to be someone that people want to go to when things get rough. And that's something you should be making yourself into, both, through the spiritual, through the physical, and through your contributions to the community. Let's see here. Got a few more thank you, Aurons, which I appreciate. Thank you very much, guys. Great talking to you. Oh, and let me know if you guys enjoyed the whiskey content and all. Like I said, just something I've been doing on the side as a hobby. I've considered making like a separate channel or something like that. I've been writing the reviews for the Blaze magazine. But if that's something you'd like to see me do in more detail, do wider set of reviews or that kind of thing, let me know if that's content that you're interested in. I can look more into that. Joe McDermott says, "Any tips on giving friends who are satisfied with 2024 a sense of urgency?" Yes, that's a great question. There are especially a lot of people who are like, "Well, Trump won some victories. We're in power. I don't need to think about this anymore." They're not paying attention to what's going on around them, and I would say it's really important to impose onto people the understanding that these institutions will come back. Save the Democrat quotes where they say, we're going to arrest all these people. We're going to arrest Tom Homan and we're going to arrest Marco Rubio and we're going to put all these people in jail for war crimes. Pete Hegseth, let them know they're coming for you too. When these people are back in power, when they control the FBI again, which has not been dismantled and is totally still full of liberals, when they come back, they're going to go after you again. And like you need to make clear to them that the problem is existential and continuing. It's not minor and it's not over. It's not solved because you won an election. That's not how it works. Mr. Biofan says, "What should I buy on Steam sale?" Good question. I really haven't played a ton of new video games this year. I really like the first Hades, but the second one is just awful and filled with woke trash. So I certainly cannot recommend that at all. Uh, Man, I don't have a lot of great immediate recommendations for new video games to be honest. I tend to go back and play like if I play video games at this point, I'm going back to replay like old Castlevanias or that kind of thing. I really don't spend a lot of time because I'm an old man. It's just how it is. Like I've gotten to the point where I'm more interested in retro games than I am new games. I just don't want to chase the hardware. I don't usually have 80 hours of my time. Every video game now wants to be 80 hours long, which was cool when I was 12 and didn't have much to do with my life. But today I just cannot invest that kind of time anymore. So it tends to be smaller bursts of gaming that I do now. Says Gobblefist says, "Have you watched Frieren yet?" Nope, I don't even know how to pronounce it, so obviously not very good with that. Dalton says, "Have you ever had High West double rye?" Yes. So High West is interesting. They've fallen off a little bit. They used to have some really good stuff. Their Prisoner's Share and their what's it called? Winter's Night Dram or something like that. Those were all good. They always had the Campfire and the other rye, their higher end rye. It's like Resolution or something rye. That was good. The double rye is more of a mixing rye. It's more of so that's one that I use if I'm making like a old fashioned. It's more of it's good, but I wouldn't drink it neat too often. There are other ryes that I would prefer neat. However, it's a great cocktail one. It's got the blend of the two different mash bills, so the high rye and then the normal rye, which makes it a much more even ride than you'd get in some of those other ones. Stands up well to other ingredients and cocktails. So I'm a fan. But it wouldn't be something that I would put on, like just a block of ice on a regular basis. Let's see here. More thank yous. Appreciate it, guys. Aramag Discourse says, "How would you grade the American rights performance over the last year overall?" Well, if we were talking about the first 3 months, I'd say like A minus. If we're talking about the last 3 months, I'd say D minus. So started out really strong, looked great, but this is the problem with executive orders. There's only so much you can do, and eventually, judges start hitting you, and Congress needs to actually pass legislation. And as you can tell from the fact that Trump is still desperately even trying to just get like basic nominees through his own Senate, the Republican Party still hates Trump. Like they're still anti-Trump. The Republican Party is still anti-Trump, and that's what you got to understand. So I think that in many ways the administration is doing their best, but at some point they're going to have to either decide like we're breaking the glass and just doing stuff, or they're going to continue to run into these problems, because I just don't think they're going to be able to get congressional Republicans in line. Let's see. Chud pill to term. Says, "Can we make chud pill to term?" I don't know. I mean, it is a term. It exists, but it's not my favorite I mean, I will sometimes invoke chud to kind of give a sense that the liberals hate you. But I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'm fully willing to embrace that, like the full on chud nationalism. I'm not sure if I'm ready to embrace that as the overall term for what we're doing. Jacob says, "Have you ever tried the Bird Dog whiskeys? I like the strawberry, but it's probably too ssweet for a lot of people. Don't care for the blackberry." Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that one of those like artificially flavored? Like they've got 1,000. It's like the old smoky. They got 1,000 artificially flavored. I'm not big on that. I'm more of a mainstream bourbon guy. I like bourbons that are finished in other flavors, but those tend to be more delicately blended in because the finish is coming from a natural barreling process as opposed to just like dumping artificial flavor in there. That I can usually taste right away, and I tend not to be a big fan. Let's see. We've got K Pacer Lastowski says, "Are you pro or against believing in Santa Claus with one's kids? Big argument in the family right now." Yeah, I am sympathetic to the existence of Santa Claus because, of course, he does exist. But I understand that some people are worried that that kind of disenchantment early on, if a child, falls under the understanding that there isn't a Santa Claus, that poor child can lose faith in other miraculous contents or is worried that their parents are lying to them on some level. I get that, and that is a real concern. I don't hold it against anyone who doesn't encourage their child to write to Santa Claus and that kind of thing. But ultimately, I think it's okay to have those mystified moments. But the way you transition your child to understanding Santa Claus probably matters. That's probably something I can think on deeper. But like I said, like just kind of generally, I'm sentimentally attached to that notion and understanding. But I do get the I do get the points people make about it being a problem. Let's see here. I think I've got one more super chat again, or is that the same one? Oh, I think it's yes. Joe says, "A Merry Christmas, friends. God bless us all in the battles of 2026 with a big donation." You may have already put that one out there. I don't know. I might just reread it again, but thank you either way. Appreciate it. You got a double super chat if that's the case. All right, guys. Well, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Looks like we've gotten through a good amount of questions and we're coming up in an hour. Again, if you like this type of content, let me know. This is just something fun I was going to do for Christmas, but if it's popular or if people enjoy it, then maybe I can start working in any of these, some of these reviews or different things, or I can start a separate channel, separate podcast, that kind of thing. See how that works if people enjoy that. But of course, the main content here will remain what it's been. This is mainly just a fun trial run during the Christmas season to see how people enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody, once again for joining me. It's been fantastic to speak with all of you. Again, I really appreciate your support. It's been another amazing year of growth and interesting things to the channel. I've just been able to do all kinds of amazing stuff. I mean, it's been a wild year of things. Again, I just never thought that I would get to do so, and it's all thanks to you guys. So I'm just incredibly blessed. I want to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. And as always, I will talk to you next time.